Hello and welcome back to Cinnamon Sanctuary. Today we are making chocolate pound cake. Nice, rich, buttery, soft, fluffy, all the good things chocolate pound cake. So if you want to find out how I go about making this, please stay tuned. For the chocolate pound cake, we'll be needing about 1.5 cups of plain flour, 1 cup of sugar, about 1 cup of unsalted butter, 4 eggs at room temperature, about 2 tablespoons of milk. We'll also be needing about half a teaspoon of salt, probably 1 teaspoon of baking powder, and 1/4 cup of cocoa powder, which is specifically used for baking, so this one does not contain any sugar. And we'll also be needing some vanilla essence. I'm just quickly showing you which cocoa powder I'll be using for the purposes of this recipe. So this is cocoa powder by Tesco, which is specifically for baking, and as mentioned, it does not have any sugar in it. So to begin, we are going to mix 1/4 cup of hot water with 1/4 cup of cocoa powder and mix it up and set aside to use later on. And the reason why we are taking this step is because I find that this leads to a richer chocolate cake if you mix the cocoa powder in a bit of hot water first. Now I'm just going to go ahead and mix up the remaining dry ingredients. So we're just going to combine the flour, baking powder and salt. Next, we're going to go ahead and cream the butter and sugar. So we're using unsalted butter here, which I've left at room temperature. So this is pretty easy to work with now. It's quite soft, and I'm just spreading it in the bowl before going ahead to whisk it for about 5 minutes. So I'm just whisking it rigorously for 5 minutes before adding the sugar, at which point I will whisk further until we find like a creamy consistency, which is light in color. And this step can also be taken with a mixer. If you have an electric mixer, if you prefer, you can use one. I have one, but I just decided this time to use the whisk to do this. I've got a nice arm workout going, been whisking away for about 8 minutes, and you are looking for this light, creamy texture here. And once you attain this consistency, we can now mix in our eggs one by one. Next step, once the eggs have been mixed into the batter, we can now add the cocoa powder and hot water mix, which we have previously set aside, and combine. Next, we are going to combine the flour into the batter in 2 parts. So I'm just adding half of the flour now and mixing very cautiously. So it's really important during this step that you don't overmix your batter if you want to preserve the integrity of the cake. If you want to end up with nice, fluffy and soft cake, you want to ensure that you proceed very carefully here. It doesn't matter if you have a few lumps in your batter, that's perfectly fine. But yeah, if you want nice soft cake, please proceed carefully. So after I've combined them carefully, I'm adding in the 2 tablespoons of milk that we had set aside earlier and combining again, after which you can now add the remaining flour and combine. Our batter is now ready to be poured into this loaf pan. I don't have the exact measurements for this loaf pan, but I'm going to put them in the description box once I figured it out. And I've just buttered it and spread it, lined it with parchment paper. I actually did this as a first step, so I should have said this at the beginning. Make sure that you butter the loaf pan. And now I'm just pouring the batter in, after which we are going to put this in an oven preheated at 180 degrees Celsius. Each oven varies, but I've left my cake in for about 1 hour, and one way to find out if your cake is done is to put a clean knife into the middle of the cake, and if it comes out clean, then your cake should be done, which it was in this case. So I'm just removing it from the tin, but before removing it from the tin, you might want to wait about 5 to 10 minutes just to make sure that it's nicely set, and then very carefully use your knife to remove it across the edges and let it rest and cool down for about 45 minutes before spreading it with a chocolate ganache. Next, we are going to proceed with our chocolate ganache. So the way I'm doing this, I'm just going to add a bit of hot water into a pan, put the fire on very low heat, and cover the pan with another bowl into which I'm going to melt about 90 grams of cooking chocolate, about 1 tablespoon of maple syrup, and some butter, about 2 tablespoons of butter. And that's the easiest way to make a chocolate ganache. Just proceed with care, because obviously your bowl on top of the pan will be very hot. And yeah, that's about it really. It's fairly simple to make and it shouldn't take too long. After about 3 to 4 minutes of stirring, you're left with this nice glistening chocolate ganache. And I forgot to mention earlier, if you don't have maple syrup, you can also use honey instead as an alternative to mix into the chocolate pieces. When you're making the ganache, it's a nice alternative. And now I'm just pouring and spreading the mix onto the cooled chocolate cake. And the great thing about this step is it seeps into the pockets of the cake, which makes it extra moist. I really don't like this word, but I couldn't think of anything else to say, but you get the gist. So now I'm just spreading this nicely, making sure that I also create this nice dripping effect at the sides of the cake, which I think look quite cool. And then once that's done, I'm just going to sprinkle some hundreds and thousands of it, and that will be the end. This step is optional, guys. You don't have to do this. We already left with a really nice glistening and lovely chocolate cake here. But because I have children, they like to see colors. So I thought it'd be fun to sprinkle the cake with a few hundreds and thousands just for that extra effect. And voila, our chocolate pound cake is finally done. I've left this actually rest overnight because I wanted the ganache to set properly. You know, I was scared to cut into it whilst it was still fresh. So I just let it set overnight, and it's got this hard-ish consistency at the top. And this is what it looks like on the inside. It's nice and soft, and it's absolutely delicious. I really hope you enjoyed this. Leave a comment and a like. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you very soon on my next video. Bye.